Shalom Aleichem. And it's a little miracle right over here because for the first time in a week, the sun is coming out. Literally, the first time in a week. Just in time for our running commentary. So, we have a very special mitzvah in this week's Torah portion. Mitzvah of the Bris Milah, among others, of the circumcision that God commanded Abraham, the first Jew. And everyone knows that a circumcision, a bris, is for a baby 8 days old. But Hasidus teaches us that it goes beyond that. And there's a bris actually that's meant for all of us, for every single one of us. And it starts out with a story in the Talmud where it says that King David HaMelech, he wrote the Tehillim, and one of the Pesukim in the Psalms of the Tehillim is Sheva Bayom Hilalticha. I praise you 7 times a day. And the Talmud explains that King David was grateful, thankful that he has 7 mitzvahs all the time. And those are the tefillin on the arm, one mitzvah. The tefillin on the head is a separate mitzvah. The mezuzah is a third mitzvah. And then the 4 corners of the tzitzis. That's 4 more. So 3 plus 4 is 7. King David was praising God 7 times a day. I'm praising you. And then it tells a story that King David HaMelech, went to the Mikvah and suddenly he felt naked, literally, but naked from the mitzvahs. He felt completely forlorn. And he realized there's no tefillin, there's no tzitzis, and there's not even a mezuzah on the door. And then he remembered that he was circumcised, that he had a bris, and he felt settled. Hold on. There's noise in the park. It is going. So the Rebbe talks about the story, and it brings various sources. And the question arises, why did the Bris Milah, the circumcision, satisfy David HaMelech to realize that he's not unclothed from mitzvos, that he's not truly naked from mitzvos? But the bris happened a long time ago. It happened many years earlier. So he could have said the same thing about tefillin. He could have said, oh, my arm had put on tefillin earlier today, and that should have sufficed it. But the Rebbe goes on to explain, and he brings in the Rogatchover to explain this, who was a great early 19th century, 1900s genius scholar, photographic memory, also from a Chabad-born family. And he was known to decipher very fine matters in the Jewish law and in the Talmud. And he says that in the mitzvah of the bris, there are 3 mitzvos, 3 separate mitzvos. And each one can be, surprisingly, without the other 2. Or there can be circumstances where you have one and not the other 2. And he goes on to say, the first mitzvah is Bayom HaShmini Yimol B'sar Losa. On the 8th day, there should be an active circumcision for the baby. So that's one mitzvah. That's the active circumcision, mitzvah number 1. Mitzvah number 2 is that for the duration of the boy's life, he should be a mahul. A mahul means there's an active mitzvah, mitzvah aseh, that he should be circumcised. Mitzvah, that means that for the duration of the life, be a circumcised man. Mitzvah number 3 is a mitzvah lo taseh. It's a negative, a prohibition to not be uncircumcised. To lo yihiyeh arel. An arel means an uncircumcised individual. So we have 3 mitzvahs. One is to actively circumcise, one is to be circumcised, and the other one is to not be uncircumcised. And the Rebbe says this little wild example, but he says that there can be each of these without some of the others. Quickly, we'll just touch upon one example of each. It says that a person can be circumcised, actively circumcised on the 8th day, but then later do a procedure that will reverse the circumcision effect, and then he will be uncircumcised. Then you can have a situation where a person is born circumcised, so he doesn't need a circumcision, but he's already circumcised. So he doesn't have mitzvah number 1, but he has 2 and 3. And then, the strangest of them all is where a person can be born with 2 organs, and only one of them will be circumcised, not the other. So he could be an uncircumcised person and a circumcised. Anyway, that's that. Now, the Rebbe goes in and says, everything in the Torah, every law, every story has its relevance for all mankind, and for men, women, and children. And what is its relevance for us? So he says that the concept of milah, of to circumcise oneself in a spiritual sense, is the concept of becoming more refined, of removing the coarseness of ourselves, of our body, of our nature, of our character. And there's the cutting, the term milah, circumcision, is also in the Torah about God circumcising our heart to make us more refined. So the Rebbe says the first mitzvah, to be actively circumcised, that's the mitzvah for every Jew, man, woman, or child, to work hard, to do something actively to become more refined, to remove the coarseness of ourselves and to elevate ourselves, of our bodies. Now, a person can do that, and for it to be a milah, a bris milah, it's got to hurt. And that's what the Rebbe says. It's got to be like the original. It's got to be a cut in the flesh. It's got to be painful. It's got to be bloody. Otherwise, it's not considered a bris. So number 1, says the Rebbe, if Judaism comes easy to you, if it's easy for you to pray, if it's easy for you to study Torah, if it's easy for you to help other people, then you're not practicing Judaism. You're observing, you're doing what you got to do. But, sorry, I'll rephrase that. You are practicing Judaism, but you're not being circumcised. You're not refining yourself in the way that you need to be refined. In order for us to be elevated and to be refined, it's got to hurt. It has to be painful like the bris. It's got to be flesh cutting and blood letting. Otherwise, we're doing the do, but we're not becoming better people from it. We're not becoming more refined. And then the Rebbe says we have to channel that toil, that all that effort that we're going to have in our Judaism into both channels of positive commandments and negative commandments. And they're in relation to the 2 other mitzvahs. There's a mitzvah to be a mahol, to be a circumcised individual. That's a positive commandment. So the lesson from there is that we need to toil in our positive commandments. And we also have the prohibition, the negative mitzvah, mitzvah lo taseh, shelo yehei arel. There shouldn't be an uncircumcised individual. And that tells us that we should toil and work hard in our negative commandments, also observing the negative. That's the story from the bris and its relevance to our life. Related to that, the Rebbe says there's another story about the Rogatchover on the same concept, where the Rogatchover was teaching this idea that the bris is going back to answer King David. Why wasn't the tefillin arm enough? Why did he need the bris? So the Rogatchover explains that the bris one of the uniquenesses of the bris mitzvah is that it's not a one-time deed and then it's all over. But it's what he calls a pe'ula nimsheches. It's an active mitzvah. It's an ongoing activity. Pe'ula nimsheches is an ongoing activity. It's something that's happening continually. So the moment a person has a bris, it continues to have a bris every moment. It's not like it happened once and it's all over. He said that, and that's why King David was satisfied with remembering that he had a bris, because even though he had it maybe 50 or 60 or 80 years ago, well, no, he lived 70 years. So even though he had it many years ago, it's still actively happening now. And the Rebbe says the Rogatchover taught the same idea of a pe'ula nimsheches, of an ongoing activity regarding marriage. That he said that a person is not married one time and then the marriage is over, but he says that the effect, the activity of being married happens every moment of their life after they're married. So it's like they're getting married every moment again and again and again. So it's called a pe'ula nimsheches. So this other rabbi, very great, one of the most famous non-Hasidic rabbis, Reb Chaim Brisker, when he heard that, he saw Rabbi Rogatchover, Rabbi Yosef Rosen, and he said to him, Mazel Tov. He says, what's the Mazel Tov? He says, you just got married. And this is many years after he did. So that's that. Now the Rebbe takes this further and says, in our marriage to our spouse, and in our marriage to God, we have to remember that we're not one-time married. We just got married many years ago, and that's all. We're good to go. But we need to toil. We need to work on this marriage as if it is new, as if it's happening today. It's a brand new marriage every single moment of our lives, in both our relationship with our spouses and our relationship with God. God bless you. That's it for today. Share the love. Good Shabbos.